Just tell me your name and your age and what you're running for, what your current position is. Just introduce
Ed
yourself.
Robb. I'm currently self-employed. I own Edward H. Robb and Associates, which is an economic and financial consulting company. I am 68 years old. I've been a resident of Columbia since 1972, and we can leave it at that and move on to more important things. More interesting, I hope, too.
Before we move into the issues specifically, obviously voters very familiar with you here. Tell them something that maybe they might not know about you that you might want them to know as they go into the voting booth.
Well, I don't know what that would be. I don't know.
It can be whatever you want. An interesting fact maybe about yourself, about your personal life, maybe just something more that voters might not be familiar about Ed Robb.
I don't know if there's anything, that they haven't found out by now. I mean, when you run 3 times for the state legislature and you get involved in all of that, I think most of the information that has come out has come out. You have to list your hobbies, you have to list what your interests are, and all that other kind of stuff. So they probably know everything they need to know by this point.
Old hand at this.
An old hand.
Yeah,
at that,
there you go. Well, I guess I want to ask you why you think that people should be interested in this race, because it's very much a race that doesn't get the high press of city races and state races is kind of in this no man's land, and sometimes people don't know what to make of county government. What are the issues that you see as at stake, and why should people care?
Well, obviously, even if you live inside the city of Columbia, okay, you have to remind yourself that you are in the county. I mean, the county includes all of the incorporated cities. So whether you live in Ashland or Centralia or Harrisburg or Hartsburg or any place else, you are a resident of Boone County, and Boone County is responsible for all of the public safety outside of the city limits, and in some areas they actually contract for that. So there's a few small areas where the sheriff actually is the law enforcement agency. And the other thing, obviously, is the court system. The county is responsible for the court system. So if you run afoul of the law and you have to go through the circuit court, the county is responsible for that. And that is one of the prime. Well, they have some money from the state, but all of the overhead is paid for by the county and comes out of the general revenue. Also, road and bridge. If you want to drive around in the country outside the city limits and you want to take a look at the beautiful fall foliage and that sort of thing, you want to drive up and down the county roads, the county is responsible for the maintenance of those and the construction and the paving for some of them. The county has about 800 miles of road, 400 of which is paved and 400, unfortunately, is not, or fortunately, depending on your perspective on that. And a lot of people don't want their roads paved who live out in the country or in the county outside the city limits, because they don't want to see the development come out there. And obviously, to the extent that you pave a road, you get development faster. It's pretty much a given. So it's interesting when you go talk to people door to door about their likes and dislikes. Now, a lot of them have some very strong feelings about how those roads are maintained and the amount of dust and whether or not they're crowned properly. I mean, you can get into lots of interesting discussions about that. But it's out in the county, outside the city limits. That's one of the, of course, major issues, and it's a significant part. It's almost half of the total budget of the county. Mm-hmm. So,
I want to ask you, just moving to kind of the other side, I think we can come back to development in a second, but two of the major centerpieces of at least your public relations side of your campaign have been salaries and budgets. So
correct.
Let's talk about budgets first.
Okay.
One of your ads says that you're going to bring, if elected, sound and transparent budgeting practices to the county.
Correct.
The obvious implication
I'm going to try that.
Yeah,
yes.
The obvious implication being that current budget practices are neither sound nor transparent. Tell me what you mean by that.
Okay. In essence, you can think of the county as having 2 piles of money that they spend. Call it the primary programs, the primary pile of money, and then there's the B pile of money. Okay. In the A pile of money, we have administration and policy, which covers most of the elected officials. And then also under that would be law enforcement, and that includes and judiciary. So that's the courts, the county sheriff, the public administrator, and the jail. And then underneath that is the last piece, and that's road and bridge. Now, everything else then gets put in this bottom part, and that's all the social programs, community programs, things like the animal shelter, things like the health programs that the county runs in cooperation with the city, and a bunch of other, sort of odds and ends strays, so to speak. Now, this is what has been the practice of the county for as far back as anybody can remember. They tend to overfund the A pile of programs. So they'll consistently put 6 to 7% more money into those programs than they actually spend every single year. Now, since the budget is done in a hierarchy in terms of how it's funded, the A programs get funded first, and then the money that's left over is available for the B programs. So if you overfund the A programs, you have less discretionary money or funding for perhaps others programs that you may find worthwhile. And one of the ones that comes up a lot is mental health care programs in the county, which we don't have. Or we had a little problem this last year with the Humane Society where they needed some additional funding, but they weren't able to get it. And also in that bottom B pool are things like economic development, and the city or the county actually reduced the amount of money it spent on economic development in 2010. And during the middle of a recession, that's probably not a good program to cut. So all I'm saying is that if you manage your money better in the A pool, you'll have more options available to you for the B pool. You don't have to use them. I'm not saying we need to spend a lot more money in those programs, but we don't even have the option of doing that at the current time. So I think by being a little more transparent and being a little more honest about how much money we really think we're going to spend on our A primary programs, that'll give us some more discretion and some more options to look at in some other programs down in that so-called B pool.
So the impression that I had going in was that there are a couple of different programs that sort of run kind of parallel, like side by side, and they're all kind of co-equal of each other, and they get a little bit more money budgeted in just to kind of budget for statutory requirements that may fall into the different departments of county government. But it's but you say that's. Are you saying that it's kind of different, that it's not that all of these programs are co-equal, it's that there are two different levels of programs, if you see it.
One is called
so it's not necessarily as the debate is being framed, I guess.
No, one is sort of called the primary functions of the county government. The other one is sometimes referred to as supplemental. Now, I don't like supplemental because that means, to me, in addition to. It's simply a lower priority set of funding programs than the A pool. And the A pool is the A pool primarily because it's mandated by state statute. We have to take care of the jail. We have to fund the county sheriff. We have to fund the courts. We have to fund road and bridge. Those are all mandated by state statute. So, but there's nothing in state statute that says we have to do anything with mental health, that we have to have a cooperative health program with the city, that we have to put money into the Humane Society, or a lot of other little programs. Like there's nothing that says that we have to provide money to READY to help fund the economic development programs, in the mid-Missouri area, and particularly in Boone County and Columbia. So.
You've come under some criticism. The auditor released a response that to some of the comments that you made, and you read it and you sort of try and understand the budget from an outsider's perspective, and it's like, well, if you have to run elections as a function of the county, and
right.
No one, either someone can sign up for that board of trustees election that the county is responsible for, or there's only one candidate, so they don't have to hold an election. It would seem to the outsider as though, of course, it makes sense. You budget more money and then expect to spend less when you've got to take care of statutory requirements, some of which may not actually come up as situations.
That would be fine, except, my training is as an economist, and in particular as an econometrician and a statistician. And if that happened once every now and then, that would be fine. But it doesn't happen just every now and then. It happens every single year. Every single year. 6 to 7% more money is appropriated than we spend. Now, there's lots of reasons for it, but there's no reason. There's lots of reasons stated for it, Okay. And that thing about elections, they change from year to year. Well, we should know that. Some years, obviously an election year that is divisible by 4, is going to have a lot more expenditures than one that's an odd number. And the same thing is true in, we know a lot more about election cycles, and if it wasn't for school boards, every now and then slipping one in or some of the local city municipality elections, okay, there would be very little election activity in certain years. And even with those, there still isn't that much. Now, there's lots of other programs, that have cycles, and there's no doubt about that. But we know what those cycles are. This is not rocket science, and someone said, well, people quit, people retire, and obviously that lapses money because they can't fill those positions. They need to go talk to the Columbia Public School System. They track that, to within a nance because they want to know exactly how many people are going to either quit or retire each year. In fact, they pay a bonus for people, telling them up front that they are going to retire because they know that means that they're going to have to replace that person. And they also know that they're going to probably be able to save some money because the person that the replacement is going to have less seniority and less time on the job and perhaps fewer degrees than the person that just retired, and they'll have some money savings. And county government should do the same thing. We ought to know that. Statistically, we know that on the average, this number of people are going to quit each year. This number of people are going to retire. We just need to build that into the budget process and not simply say, oh, look, it happened. It's a surprise. Well, it's not a surprise because we know it's going to happen. And we don't know exactly what department it's going to happen in, but we can work our way around that, I think.
I think what they're saying, at the end of the day, what they say is that your reading of the budget situation shows a lack of a grasp of what's going on. And I guess I'd like for you to respond to that criticism that they don't see that you understand how it works.
I understand what they're talking about. Okay. I understand that we need to have an emergency and contingency fund that's equal to 3% of the amount of the general fund budget. Okay. But all I'm saying is they've been doing this budget process the same way now for year after year after year for decades. Let's bring some more science into this. Let's bring more statistics into this. Let's see if we can fine-tune this process so that as, the auditor's job is to propose a budget. She drafts a budget that is then presented to the commission, and then they get to change it however they want to. So it's not June Pitchford's job to pass a budget. It's her job to draft one. And then it's
June Pitchford, the county auditor for
county
people
auditor.
That's
That's by state statute. Now, it's up to the commission then to go through that and decide based on their policy concerns or the policy that they're reflecting, how they want it to change that. And they can change it completely if they wanted to. There's certain things they have to do, but they could move money around between departments, and they could move more money into the health or the community services things. They could move it out of some of the programs at the top, or they could put more money into the sheriff's department. They could put more, As of now, we know we have a real problem with the public administrator. She has a huge caseload now, and she probably doesn't have enough resources to manage it. And that has direct implications then about the law and, the public safety and the judiciary portion of the budget, because if she's dealing with people who have some mental illness problems of any sort whatsoever, there's an excellent chance that if they're not addressed, that we may see them then in the law side of, in terms of the sheriff's department or going through the court system. And that just adds some additional cost on that side. So to the extent that we can't deal with programs like that, or we can't give her additional resources, or we can't do anything in the mental health area, then we have these other, there's no free lunch. We need to be cognizant of the fact that if we want to do what's best for the citizens of Boone County, that we need to maintain as much flexibility as possible, and the system that we have in place for creating the budget limits that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying we're having a huge overhaul. I'm saying we just need to fine-tune it and tweak it so that we can become even better stewards of the money that the people of Boone County trust us to spend on their behalf.